welcome to the show, Nicole. I'm so pleased to have you for another episode of Take Back Mondays, the podcast helping people love Mondays again, escape their 9 to 5, and build lives of freedom that they love. So today I have a very special guest. Nicole, tell me how to pronounce your last name.
It's Oden.
Oden. Okay, just straight up. And Nicole is an amazing person that you need to know if you are a small business owner, because Nicole actually runs a legal contract shop. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up doing this business. It's kind of interesting how you ended up creating that, filling that need.
Yeah, so I have been a licensed attorney for over 10 years now in the state of California. And I started my practice in family law. Interestingly enough, I clerked for a judge in law school, and that was kind of the path that I thought I wanted to take. And so as soon as I graduated, started at a boutique law firm. I was litigating. I was in and out of court multiple times a week, working 12 to 14-hour days. And then I had my daughter, and it kind of just flipped everything upside down to where it just wasn't a practical solution to be able to be present for my little 3-month-old at home. And so I knew I needed to figure something else out and do something else. And so I ended up going out and starting my own virtual law practice, which I still have, Nicole Cheri Oden Law PC. And I started taking on out of court family law matters. So I really focus on cooperative, collaborative, and mediation family law cases. And that is still part of my practice to this day. And as I was starting my practice, I kind of stumbled into the online space and started connecting with other female business owners because I was interested in kind of building the virtual practice and getting out there and online marketing and things. And as soon as a lot of these women would find out I was an attorney, they would start sending me messages on Instagram and on Facebook asking questions about their contracts and entity formation. And, can you just answer this one thing? And it was shocking to me because my response was always like, you need to find an attorney. You want to work with an attorney to walk through some of these questions for your business specifics. And 99% of the time, the response was, it's too scary, it's too overwhelming, it's too expensive, I don't know where to start. And it was kind of like that entrepreneurial light bulb went off in my head to where it was like, these women, this subset of online business owners, need help. Someone who is affordable, accessible, approachable, so that it doesn't feel so scary and they're not ignoring those legal foundations to build a solid business for themselves and build a legacy for their families. And so I added online business law to my practice. So if you are in California, I can draft custom contracts and policies for your business. I also do federal trademark registration. So if you're a US-based business owner, I can help with that because that is under federal law. But that was part of the solution, right? Because not everybody wanted to work with an attorney. A lot of starting business owners rely on Google searches and friends of friends and their legal documents to get started because they just don't budget appropriately for those legal needs that they really do need to establish from day one. And so again, I decided, okay, what can I do to kind of meet them where they are? I've got this portion of my practice, but let's also now launch the legal templates so that they get things in writing. They have written client agreements. They have non-disclosure agreements. They have privacy policies, all these things that they need that they're just, relying on, either hoping that something doesn't happen or something that they pulled up on Google that they don't even know if it fits their business. So it's been kind of a winding road, but it's been a really fun journey.
Oh my goodness. Well, I love your story. And, I think that being in law is one of those particular types of industries where it's not very family friendly between the two of us. The hours seem to be very long, and it seems to all lawyers I talk to have had that dilemma when they're having children. And that's unfortunate. So I'm glad that you found a compromise that works for you and your family. So, kudos to you for that part. And then also you're indirectly helping other women do the same, because creating a business is already daunting enough, but a lot of people look later. They're like, oh, I'll figure out my business entity later. Right now, I'm just trying to set up my e-shop or focus on the products and serve my customers. And that's kind of a mistake, because the risks and the costs associated with not taking care of that are pretty high. So in hindsight, it's like not having insurance and then having a major expense and realizing, oh, why did I not take care of the insurance when it wasn't that big of a deal, but it could have saved me thousands and thousands of dollars and months of headache. So you mentioned a few things really quickly. So I want to make sure the audience hears these things. So number one, the very basics are entity formation. So when someone says, you know, I want to go into an online business, then what would you advise them to do first and foremost?
So I think the first step when you decide that you want to hang your shingle and open a business online really is to set a consultation with a small business attorney in your area. I think that just getting that initial information really is key. And it's not saying that you have to hire that attorney. It really is booking them for an hour of their time to say, this is the business I'm looking to start. What are my next steps? Because every business is different. But generally, most of the time, people can hang their shingle and operate as a sole proprietor, meaning they are their business for a relatively short period of time to get proof of concept. Are they going to be booking clients? Are they going to be starting to make money with this idea? So long as they have a very solid insurance policy in place. That is my caveat. If you have a very good insurance policy to cover yourself if something happens, I think that that window of time to kind of get proof of concept before you run out and start forming an entity and jumping through all these legal hoops is a smart move. But once you know, like within that 6-month window, I'm starting to book clients, I'm selling products, whatever it is that you're doing online, you really do want to look into forming some sort of entity to act as essentially a buffer between you and your business, because the entity is its own individual under the law. And I'm going to caveat kind of everything that I'm saying with the fact that I'm giving information and education. It's not advice. And again, you definitely want to chat with an attorney in your area to make sure you're taking the right steps for you in your particular business. Because I think that really is key at the end of the day. You know, there is a lot of overarching concepts in terms of businesses and types of business and how things are run. But I think it really is imperative to at least have that initial touch base with an attorney, because as your business grows and scales, you're going to need to transition from even just like the legal template type legal information to more customized questions, because there are going to be situations that come up that you're not going to know how to handle. And that is part of being a business owner. So starting that relationship early on, I think, is one of the smartest things that you can do. But yes, I think, that kind of initial entry level, which entity should I form, is also a question that you kind of want to explore earlier rather than later.
So being proactive versus reactive, and really weighing out the pros and cons with a specialist who understands your local business laws and your situation, because very quickly that situation could change. And so you want to have that initial contact so that then you can go back to them in the right time frame and capture what you need to do, so that you're always covered. So we're not going to go too much into any kind of legal advice, and I will put that in the show notes that we're not here to give you legal advice today. In fact, we're here to tell you that you need to seek out legal advice. But Nicole does have some very great starter packages that we will put in the show notes as well, to help you start off initially. So transitioning to that. So let's say that I did that and I got in place the entity that I need. Then I'm going to open a website. So obviously, as far as I know, there's a couple of documents that a sole proprietor or an LLC need on their website. So the ones that I've seen that are most common are terms of use, privacy policy, terms and conditions. Do we really need all three?
Yes, you really do. So number one, your privacy policy is actually legally required now. So that's not one you can wiggle out of. In 2004, California became the first state to actually require businesses who do business with Californian residents to have a privacy policy on their website. We went on in 2020 to expand, the legal requirements as to what needed to be in the privacy policy and who it applied to. There were more amendments made that actually went into effect here recently. And then in 2018, the European Union actually launched their own legislation, the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, which I'm sure most of you have heard that term kicked around somewhere in the online space before. And that required you to have a privacy policy as well as other sort of privacy requirements if you do business or collect personal information from even one European Union resident. So you can't get out of having a privacy policy, like period, end of story. And really at the end of the day, a privacy policy is just telling your website users what personal information you're collecting, be that their name, email address, if you're a health coach and you're collecting people's weight and age and gender and that type of stuff, and what you're going to do with it. So that really is what a privacy policy is for. It's being very transparent in how you're going to handle consumer information. There is this big swing, especially in the online space with marketing and such, that we're trying to give power back to the consumers after a decade or two of some very spammy, smarmy marketing tactics. And so legal action is very slow to kind of catch up with where technology is. So things are still evolving, and there's actually federal legislation pending now for a US-wide privacy policy type legislation, because states so far have been enacting their own. So it's been kind of a fun, interesting, changing legal landscape that I know a lot of business owners just stick their head in the sand because it seems so overwhelming. And again, that's why having someone who can kind of cut through the noise and tell you this is how it specifically applies to you in your business is so beneficial.
Well, especially in the online space, because we're not operating statewide. As soon as you put up a website, you don't have a "are you over 21" type form. Like, to enter this website, you must not be in California. And if you did, you'd probably get other problems. You'd probably get lawsuits for discrimination, or you cannot be in Europe. Please confirm you're not in Europe. I mean, come on. So better safe than sorry, right? It's just smarter to make sure that you're up to speed with your GDPR regulations, with the California privacy laws, even if you're not really targeting people from those places, because as long as you have a site that's publicly available and you're using keywords, anyone could stumble upon it.
Exactly.
And there's a lot to be said about that. I'm a marketer, so I know about like double opt-ins and consenting, but I want to just stress anyone listening to this podcast to take this seriously, because especially if you, as a small business owner, may be hiring various marketing firms to help you out with campaigns. I see this all the time where someone's like, I hired this firm to host a webinar for me. They handled all the opt-ins. They collected all the data. They started emailing the people. And later on, these people started getting spam from those people's partners. Not even the original person who they thought they were opting in for, but like getting flooded with other offers from various people. They're like, how did I ever get on these lists? And trace it back to you. And so be very, very careful when you hire someone to remember that people visiting your website are relying on your privacy policy. So if you partner up with someone, make sure that this is a very, very legitimate company, and that you're clear what data you want them to have from your customers too, right?
Well, and especially under GDPR, there are provisions that provide that you are responsible for how the data processor processes that personal information on your behalf. So arguably that third-party company that you've hired to run the webinar or whatever it may be, if they're handling things on your behalf and something happens and perhaps there's a data breach that does damage to somebody in the European Union, you are exposing yourself to an actual personal cause of action, not just fines, but they could literally sue you for that data breach. So, and I know most online small business owners are thinking, oh, I don't have to worry about that. I don't do this or I don't do that, but we're going to grow, right? The reason to start a business is to grow, to expand, to earn income. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is why we start businesses. So you have to think long-term picture, not just where you are now, but where you're growing. And so establishing those practices now of being mindful about how you're doing business is a huge benefit to you. Because if you are not paying attention on the back end, it's going to come out. I mean, your customers, your clients are going to somehow find that out down the line if you're really not paying attention to those important things.
These mistakes can be very costly. So if you're giving data to a third party who is apparently helping you out with a marketing campaign, whether it's an event or a webinar or just any kind of marketing effort, you have to make sure that you have a contract in place with them to protect your client's data. Because if I'm your customer, I signed up via you. One mistake I see commonly happening is a lot of naivety around sharing people's private information. And I think that one of the conceptions that people have is this big coach who's very obviously successful is doing it, so can I. And they're interpreting that this person is taking data and reselling it to other people or doing cold calling and selling lists and saying, look, if you work with me and you hire me, I'll sell you the list. I have this master list. I sell it to all my students. And as somebody who works on the marketing end, and I'm actually based right now in Europe, this is very, very alarming for me to hear these kind of things. So what do you have to say about this practice? You agree with me? This is scary.
Yeah. So, obviously under GDPR, there's big issues there, right? But in the United States, our rules are still evolving and many of them are starting to somewhat mirror GDPR, but it's still technically there are some loopholes for people to be able to pass around lists. And this is where I say, no matter what, is a very dumb decision for a business owner to decide to purchase a list to use. Because you haven't built any real credibility with these people. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, people started getting spammed from third parties that they've never opted into. And they were like, who is this person? And that exactly proves why would you want to buy a list where people are going to start marking you as spam and unsubscribing? Because that is going to tank your email open rates, your spam rates. Potentially you could face, the email service provider that you use just shutting your account down because you are just consistently being marked as spam. And so long term, it just doesn't make sense as an investment for you, because I think it's going to do more harm than good. I think especially in today's online space where your brand is your business and building that goodwill with your clients and your customers is such a big piece of things, starting to build your list organically yourself is one of the best things that you can do. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I love that, because it's very hard once you've hurt your own email deliverability to gain it back. It's not something you can just undo. It's almost like having a DUI. That's how I compare it. I'm like, it takes years to fix that, or having bad credit. And so once it's easy to ruin your deliverability, but then hard to build back up. So if you're buying lists and spamming people, essentially, it sounds maybe good to you, like quick money or quick growth, but in the end, it's never worth it. There's very, very little benefit and a lot of risks to your business. So that's one thing about privacy. So moving on, what about terms of use versus terms and conditions? Because people ask me, well, wait a minute. Okay, I got it. Now I understand why I need a privacy policy, a separate one. But terms of use and terms of conditions, they sound to me to be the same. Why would I need both, right?
So they have similar purposes. And whereas the privacy policy is legally required, terms and conditions and terms of use are not. But they are a gold star business practice, because if you have an issue come up with a website user or an online customer or client, that is the contract between them. And that's the first place a court is going to look. And so terms and conditions are essentially the rules of the road for your website. They lay out what your website users, the people who come to your website, can and can't do with your content. They lay out things like if you allow the ability to share on social media, do you require credit back, those types of things. They lay out things like if you allow commenting on your blog posts, what types of comments can they leave? You obviously don't want defamatory, abusive, harassing type interactions on your comments. They also lay out things like your dispute resolution and limitations of liability type disclaimer language, especially in the online space. There are a lot of professionals that share information that could be health and wellness. It could be financial, like financial advisors, insurance professionals, attorneys, we share a lot of information. And so you have to be very clear you're sharing information and education, and it's not actually advice that they should fully rely on. Again, they need to be doing their due diligence and exploring their own case specific fact situation in terms of what they should and shouldn't do for themselves. And you're also going to lay out that if you are sharing third-party links to other websites or even affiliate links, you are disclosing that and letting them know that the experience on those other websites is handled by that other website, not by you. You're sharing it because you think it's a good opportunity. You may be sharing the affiliate link to receive commissions, and you do have to disclose that under FTC, Federal Trade Commission laws. But you're not responsible for that checkout process and for the experience with the customer service for that product or service on that linked site. So that's terms and conditions. Terms of use, similarly, is the rules of the road for your customers. So if you sell an online digital product like my legal templates, some sort of downloadable, a membership, an e-course, something like that on your website, those terms of use basically lay out what your customers can and can't do with that digital product that they've purchased. And again, same thing, limitations of liability. It's information and education, and it's not advice that they should be fully reliant on, especially if it's a licensed professional. You need to be very clear. Like in my own terms of use, I have to say I am a licensed attorney, but my LLC, my online business, is not operating as a law firm, and we are not giving advice. And so you want to be very, very clear about those types of limitations. Refunds, do you issue refunds? And if it's a no, then no, I don't issue refunds. And, it's laid out very clearly. Payment details in terms of, if you accept as it's displayed in the shop, are there very specific installment payments, whatever it may be. So this is where you can get very detailed and into the nuances of your particular product. And it's a contract. At the end of the day, it is a contract between you and your customers. So again, not required, neither are required, but definitely a gold star business practice, because you don't want to be kind of caught scratching your head saying, what if, when that issue comes up? Because the question is not if, it is when. Unfortunately, that's part of being a business owner.
I've actually, unfortunately, seen some pretty dubious practices. Once I was in a Facebook group and I saw a woman saying, well, I took that big coach's course and paid $2,000 for it, so now I'm reselling it for $1,000. And so DM me if you're interested in purchasing my copy. No joke.
Yeah.
No joke.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Like, people, when you think, oh, I don't really need those things, because if it's not like legally required, then no one ever does those things. I beg to differ. I've actually seen people take your work and try to resell it as their own, or even with your name on it, with no scruples, or maybe put it online. A jealous competitor is like, okay, I'm going to ruin her business. I'm going to buy it, and then I'm going to put it online for free.
And that's
everything scary. It's scary to be in business sometimes, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's why having those terms of use in place, especially for your products, and letting them know that they can't purchase it and share it with a third party. They can't share login details. They can't purchase your product to then turn around and create a competing product or share that information with a competitor. Those types of things. Again, you're laying out those boundaries and those rules that you can visit. If this comes up, you've got a contract that you can then, take whatever legal action you need to. But without it, you're kind of, things are questionable, because in the US, if you sell a product, there is actually statutory law that applies to product sales, even without a contract. It is not that way with services. So while oral contracts can be enforceable just as written contracts are, it is a mess of he said, she said, trying to put together Facebook message exchanges, emails, telephone recollections, and trying to prove there was a meeting of the minds. Just go around that. Put a contract in place, make sure it's very clearly detailed, worded, and it gives you something to come back to when that issue does come up.
Wonderfully said. Another thing I wanted to touch on. So now that you've got your entity established, you've really got these contracts in place where they can buy in your legal shop. That's where I'm recommending they go, the first place. And if it doesn't apply to them, you would let them know, and they should seek out other alternatives. But the one thing that I want to be specific about is that when it's on your website, a person isn't physically signing it like they would a one-to-one contract. So the terms of use, the privacy policy, the terms and conditions, those are contracts that live on your website that typically we actually link them in the footer so that they're always visible, because the footer lives on every single page pretty much. So just keep your footer and keep them in there. But since people aren't signing them, how is it enforceable? So, and I'm asking this because on all of my purchases, I have a checkbox, and the checkbox says you agree to accept the terms of use, the privacy, and the terms of and conditions. And that has to be checked so that that's part of the checkout process. Is that what you would recommend, or do you have any other best practices to make sure it's legally enforceable?
Yeah. So I think we've all seen, you visit any website, you see privacy policy and terms and conditions or terms of service, because they're kind of interchangeable depending on what the business is, in the footer. And that is called a browse wrap in internet law. It wraps the entire website browser for your website. What I think is a better practice, and also under GDPR, especially with privacy policies, is to actually have some sort of affirmative consent from your website users and from your clients and your customers if they're making a purchase. And so that is known as a click wrap in internet law. And what that is a checkbox or a button that says I have read and I agree. And it actually requires some sort of affirmative action from that, either the website user or your client or customer, to take to even get through the processing of their information to purchase. And so that is why I always recommend, when you are purchasing if you are setting up a shop or if you're purchasing a product, read the terms of use, because that's going to outline the contract, first of all. And as a business owner, having that as a requirement and really keeping records that it's a requirement to even process through to show that affirmative consent from your customers, it is a gold star practice, because it does show there is an affirmative contract here that we entered into. It's not just something slapped in the footer that they never read. If they get to that point and they click the box or check the box that says I have read and agree, and they don't read and agree, that's on them. They check the dang box and they move forward with the payment processing. Now, obviously, it's a business decision at the end of the day, depending on the case specific situation, about whether you're going to hold their feet to the fire for those specific contract terms. Maybe you have somebody that you just decide, I'm going to issue a refund because as a cost benefit analysis, it's going to save me the headache or the bad Yelp review or whatever it may be. But then at least you have the contract to fall back on. It is your decision as a business owner to, do I want to pursue this, or do I just want to buy peace of mind, depending on what the price tag is. And, in the online space, we've got those little mini products for $7, all the way up to coaching packages for $20,000. So if you have, some sort of membership with that sort of package with a heightened price tag on it, you may want to hold their feet to the fire if somebody's asking for a refund, depending on what your specific terms are. So it definitely is, I think, again, gold star business practice to handle it that way.
So this podcast could be saving you potential thousands of dollars. Seriously, I've actually been a victim of this. So I want to say that I consider myself relatively smart and that I read contracts, and when you're working in services and you're working in especially high ticket services, one-on-one with somebody who has a pristine reputation or came referred by someone else, or just has these amazing testimonials on their website, sometimes we get blinded into signing a contract without really reading the fine print. So there are legitimate reasons why we kind of skim through it. And we say, this is standard. We justify it by saying all these things I don't really understand, but it's standard practice. I'll just close my eyes and sign the bottom line. Well, I paid several $1,000s price for that mistake. So I'm just mentioning this because people listening are thinking about, well, do I need to pay attention to this? Should I really be worried or not? And when you just said, make sure that you read what you agree to, it seems like a no-brainer, but even I made that mistake. I read it and I didn't fully understand it. So instead of asking questions, I was in a hurry to move forward with the process. I signed it. And then later it cost me that much money. And the reason it cost me that much money is because the person did hold my feet to the fire. And I was in shock. And I just didn't understand how that happened. And I was like, no, that's not possible. And then I did go back and read the contract. And yes, it was in fact exactly as she had said. She knows her own contract. I signed her contract. And because I had not received the services, I tried to negotiate with her. I was like, please refund me. I mean, at least you should, I didn't get any of the services. And she said, no, my contract said I can terminate the contract at any time for any reason without any explanation, without any refunds. And at the time, I couldn't even believe it. So I tried to go through PayPal because I'd paid through PayPal. And guys, sometimes it works. So sometimes you can go to PayPal and say, I want my money back. Here's what happened. And they do take it seriously and they do review case by case. But I signed the agreement. So in the end, PayPal was like, we kind of think that, we're neutral, but we understand your situation, but you signed the contract. So in the end, we can't really do anything. You have to honor what you signed. And I'm pointing that out because I do think that legal contracts are sometimes written in a way with specific terms that lay people don't understand these terms, or they don't really understand what the consequences entail. And, like arbitration. Mm-hmm. How many normal people know what arbitration is? I've been in business a long time. I know what arbitration is, but I did not know as a new business owner. So I want to urge everyone to review your contract and don't ever let anybody pressure you into signing a contract. In fact, lay out your projects on the long term. This is what I advise people. Never get yourself into a bind, because the stupidest mistakes that I've made or my clients have made have been when we were pressured. We felt pressured. We were under a time crunch. So we just hired somebody, signed a contract to get the ball rolling, and crossed our fingers and prayed. And sometimes it works out, guys, and sometimes it doesn't. So I just want to mention that, because I think listening to you, Nicole, half of the people will take this seriously. And then there's going to be the other half that says, well, that won't happen to me, or that never happens anyway. So I'm just kind of telling my story on the side about how important it is to read the fine print. And if you don't understand, take the time to ask questions. And the second thing that really helped me in that situation was that I had found a lawyer in San Francisco, a business lawyer, who was kind of on speed dial for me, just for like quick questions. And that really helped me, because I was able to quickly call him up and show him the contract. And he said, you're not going to win, because I mean, we could fight it, but it'll probably cost you the same money you paid. Cause we were talking about like $3,000. And a lawyer is not cheap. So very quickly, it's like, well, maybe, but it will cost you probably the same money just to find out if you want or not.
I want to say, first of all, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I think it is a very common occurrence in the business space, period. And so I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it makes it more tangible for other business owners to see that it's again, not if it's going to happen. It really is when. We're all going to experience some sort of really terrible contractual situation like that. And it does, again, come to that risk benefit analysis of what is the contract for, and will it justify me spending the time, the money, the blood, sweat, and tears, and the attorney's fees to fight, or does it make sense to just kind of wash my hands of it, walk away, and chalk it up as a life lesson? And as attorneys, obviously, a lot of us work on billable hours, and many of us have made the switch to work on flat fee type agreements. And so you really want to make sure you're finding an attorney that's comfortable telling it to you straight, and not just trying to fight just to fight. They're going to give you a very business-like response of, if it were me, this is probably what I would do, but I want you to take it with a grain of salt and make your own business decision. And I think that's why it's so important, like you said, to have that relationship, to be able to pick up the phone, consult with them for half an hour, and then be able to make your own kind of educated decision based on that input.
Well, another attorney might have just taken my case and just been like, okay, let's start the billable
Let's
hours rolling.
litigate.
Let's litigate.
Yep.
That's what I love to do. I litigate all day. Um, and so just like with business coaches, there's honest and dishonest or different motives if you're just after the money or you're honestly out there with some ethics involved, you know. But I wanted to share that because that's very common. And I think the common thing I always ask people when they are going to sign a contract is look at the cancellation policy and look for an exit clause. So just like in marriage, what happens when things go sour? Wouldn't you like to figure that out when you're on good terms? And it's remember, it's only for the worst case scenario. So when you're signing these agreements, you never expect that to happen. But what if it does? Wouldn't you rather deal with it now when you guys are in the honeymoon phase, business wise or personal, and you're both really happy about it and you can find a good solution versus later on, you're going to pay for it a lot. So exit clause is a big one that I look for. You know, what happens if things don't work out? How do you get out of the contract? You know?
Yeah. Termination language is a big one, as well as dispute resolution and really
Yes.
knowing like what process are we going through if there is a dispute? Am I engaging in good faith settlement negotiations before we take a step? Are we going to mediation or arbitration? Or are we just in court? And what court are we in? What state are we in? Or what country? If it's an international contract, that's another big one. Because of the online space being so global, you know, you gotta pay attention to that stuff, because if an issue comes up and you're contracting with somebody in the UK or Canada or Timbuktu, you might have to haul your cookies and find local counsel in that other jurisdiction. So
well, that's why I let it go, because that's exactly what happened to me in my situation. The entity that I was trying to get my money back from was based in the UK. So my lawyer said, we're going to call up some, like he told me the exact steps. He said, I have contacts. I can find someone for you. We will have like a 3-way call. And then, you know, I'll try to bill you the least amount of time possible. Then she'll take it from there. If she agrees, then she'll tell you her billable hours and you'll have to litigate, you know, because you signed a contract that's valid in the UK. Yeah. So think about that for a sec, right? It's once you hire someone, you have to also think about international law. So that's why it's very important to protect yourself. And I personally prefer to work through a third-party site. There's a lot of job sites now, and they provide some legal buffer. So if you are hiring someone overseas, but you're going through this entity, legally, the contract is bound by the entity who has these contractors under their umbrella. And that gives you some more safety. If something happens, you know, you don't have to go to their country and fight with them. So there's all these things I learned the hard way, but I think young entrepreneurs, when I mean young, like new entrepreneurs listening, need to know these things. So I don't want to take up all your time, Nicole, but I do think another question that I get often is, why can't I just copy and paste the terms and conditions from your website? You're my business coach. Come on. You don't mind, do you?
Yeah. So there's a couple of issues that come with that. First of all, there's this little thing called copyright law, and that contract is somebody else's copyrighted material. And so without going down the rabbit hole of what copyright law is, essentially copyright rights attached from that moment of creation of original work of authorship. So that original contract that is your business coach's copyrighted materials. So that's one piece, and you don't want to step into that gets ugly. But on top of that, what I have seen actually play out quite a few times is people copying and pasting terms of use for their products, making no changes, and the dispute resolution section provides that the place that you're going to dispute is in a completely different state with no connection or nexus whatsoever to the online business. The refund language is different from what they intended. The pricing of the product is way off, and it's referencing a product that doesn't even exist potentially. The name of the business that is bound to those terms of use, not your business. So what legal weight does this contract have if it has no applicability at all to your business and you just slapped it up with the checkbox? You're in hot water.
Well,
I mean, you're
I compare it to taking someone else's mortgage paperwork and applying it to your home. Like there's so many specificities that are really linked to your business. And, you know, if you're a health coach or a financial coach or a legal provider in some form, you have to have extra protection in there that concern your type of business. As a business coach, one of my big legal specificities is earning disclaimer, because some people might litigate against me saying, well, you're a business coach and I'm suing you because I'm not rich. Like I hired you to teach me how to do things that would make me money. I was under the impression that I will be a millionaire because that's what I thought business coaches do. And it's been 2 months and I'm not a millionaire. So I want all my money back. Plus I want damages. And this may sound ridiculous. We may laugh at this, but there's always going to be somebody out there who will do irrational things. And some people are literally obsessed with litigating everything in their lives. They'll litigate against their gardener for not cutting the grass. They'll litigate. I mean, just go online and read Google reviews and Facebook reviews, and you see some of it, there's always a grain of truth, but a lot of it is just personality. So protect yourself, because when you hire me or I hire you, we're going into a legal agreement. And so why not be safe? We're in business. This should be very, very strongly documented. Another thing I've been doing that's just come from best practices, I don't know where I learned this, is to attach an appendix to all my contracts that says exactly this is time stamped, like the pricing is valid for this period of time, it's subject to change. So this is all what I have right now. I don't put that in my main terms and conditions. I put that as an appendix. And then I say, here's the scope we're going to work on. So it's a very customized. So you've got your general terms and conditions, and then you've got your customized scope, so that people you don't leave any room open for ambiguity or he said, but you told me on the phone this, and now but everything was written in the contract. Do you have questions? And I recently did a podcast about the onboarding process with new customers, and that's in there. It's like, we need to have a special meeting to review the contract and let them answer questions or ask questions, because like I didn't do that with the provider who I ended up losing money with. And I should not have been shy to say, I would like to go through the contract, just making sure that I understand everything, what happens with this and what happens there, because you always can push back. Every contract is modifiable, and it's all about the goodwill of the provider. So if you cannot commit to 27 years of contractual obligations, you should not feel ever pressured into signing a contract where you're like, this is an amazing coach or amazing trainer, and they have a wait list for 20 years. But don't ever feel like you have to sign that agreement if you don't agree with something or you don't understand it. Because sometimes people, especially dishonest people, will pressure you. They're like, well, I have a wait list now. So either you start with me June 1st, or, you'll have to wait 2 years. But if you don't understand what you're signing up for, please don't sign the contract. Would you agree with that advice?
Yeah. And I actually, when I work with my clients, one of the things that I like to tell them is to incorporate a lot of their contractual terms into their marketing materials to make it more user-friendly and make it more widely publicized about refunds, the scope of their services, those types of things, because it does make it more approachable for your clients and customers, and it makes the language feel less legally and overwhelming when it is that kind of more of a conversation with your potential clients and customers, and really understanding your own contract. Something that I see is a lot of people will go pay an attorney and get a contract and they don't even know what the heck it says, or they don't understand certain provisions. You really need to take the time to sit down and review your contract. And if you have questions, chat with your attorney, because there may be something that needs to be changed because you didn't understand it and you didn't communicate that you didn't understand it to your attorney, perhaps it's drafted differently than what you had intended. So that kind of open line of communication, I think, is really important. And reviewing your contract, I mean, really at least annually, but if you are making changes to your programs and things, reviewing it to make sure all the terms still apply, I think is really important. And yes, I think part of the onboarding process is to have that open dialogue with your clients that are coming on to chat about the contract and understand that contracts are living, breathing documents that can be amended. And if a client asks for revisions, that is normal. Most higher end business owners are more sophisticated when it comes to those types of things, and they will ask for more specific provisions or revisions. It doesn't mean you have to agree to all of them. There is some negotiation that comes into play, but that is part of being a business owner and being comfortable with that, or working with an attorney to help you be comfortable with that.
Ooh, I really love that you brought that up, because what you said about the contract being a living, breathing document, I've seen as my own business has evolved that I needed to add more provisions for different types of services. So as a online business owner, you may be selling physical products, digital products. You may host an event. I would go to a lawyer and get a very new contract for that. So if you have a digital marketing contract, and suddenly nowadays it's really easy. You've been setting up sales pages and landing pages, and you know how to market things. So you're like, oh, I'll just put together this in-person event. But there are a lot more legal liabilities. And you'll probably, by the way, I mean, we're not here to give legal advice, but I'm just going to throw this out there. You'll probably need additional insurance as well. So you'll probably need a special contract for that event, and that you can probably reuse for future similar events. But if you're going to suddenly launch an in-person retreat or an event or an in-person workshop, you're going to invite people into a space. You want to make sure that you have really much different legal provisions than if they're just buying things off your e-boutique online, right? And insurance to go with it.
Yeah.
So there's so many layers of business, and your business does evolve. So having a good relationship with a lawyer is essential. Do you have any advice for new entrepreneurs who don't have a lawyer and are thinking, okay, I can get some contracts online, I got that, but what about finding a good business lawyer in my state? Where should I start? Is there do I just go the yellow pages or Google or?
Well, I think the first place to start really is to talk to your other business owner friends that are local to you, if you have some, and see who they work with or if they have referrals. Most of my business, quite frankly, is referral business for my law firm. And I set it up that way for a reason. I am very particular about my clients and who I work with, and most attorneys are, if you found a good attorney. Because especially for business, it can be an ongoing indefinite relationship as long as the business is progressing, because your needs are going to change and you're going to have further questions. And so you really want to look at it as cultivating that long-term relationship. So referrals are a huge, huge thing, I think. If you don't have somebody local to you and you have no idea where to start, a good place really is to go to your state's state bar website. They have attorney listings. So you can start there. They have referral services. So you can call and ask the referral service for a list of small business attorneys and just start calling around. Many offer free or discounted consultations, like I said, to just sit down and get a feel for them, see if it's somebody that you could work with long-term. Especially in the online space, finding a small business attorney who has experience in the online space is very important, because it is kind of a different ballpark. It's very similar law, but it's a different platform, and there are nuances and there are things that they need to be aware of in terms of technology and data privacy. And so I think that's a very important question, is kind of to get a feel for their experience. Do they have experience running a business themselves? Not just their law practice, but like actually running a business to be able to give you that risk benefit analysis kind of conversation versus just that very litigious, like, well, we're going to litigate and we're going to get your money. Because like you said, at the end of the day, the bill could be, 20 times more than what's at stake. And as a business owner, most of the time we're really wanting to make a decision that, affects the bottom line less and will protect us and be less headache. So it's very important, I think, to kind of start those conversations. Get referrals first, reach out to your state bar. And if you know an attorney with a different practice area, even reaching out and asking them, like, I know that you don't practice this, but do you know people who do? That's also a good way to start.
Well, because sometimes in your law practice, you overlap. So you may actually need to bring in a specialist because it involves a dispute with real estate or it involves, so it may be a business client, but they're having a specific issue that involves another specialty. So I've seen that as well, where lawyers collaborate a lot with others.
Yeah.
Another source that I found personally has been helpful is when you're a new business owner, and if you really don't have any connections yet, other business owners locally, is to find what are the prominent local business associations, the most credible ones, and start going. They usually have like a membership, a fee-based type of thing, and they have meetings and they have their own website. You can get a login, and there you might find a whole bunch of lawyers that are just waiting for you. That you never knew about, or you will find a good resource where you can ask them. There's a chat room, or there's meetups, or there's a local branch leader. So there's definitely a lot of ways to ask through that as well. But this has been super helpful. I'm not going to take any more of your time, Nicole. We were already a little bit late today. So thank you so much. I would love to know where people can reach you. So you have a website where we can actually get some of these documents, these beautiful legal documents that are amazing that we all need.
Yeah, so you can find legal templates and more. So that is the website, and that is me all over social media. And for my law firm, that's NicoleCheriOdenLaw.com, and I'm Nicole Cheri Oden Law on all the socials. So you can find me on either.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. And I'm sure that some of the people listening are gonna be coming by that website pretty soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on. This was fun.
Thank you.